up guys, this is Grant, the founder of cartfab.com, and today we're looking at my Manco Thunderbird rebuild. We're going to look at the engine, we're going to look at all the parts that I got a lot of them from Go Power Sports as well as other places. I got links in the description for all that. Then we're going to move on to paint, pinstriping, true automotive clear coat, 2K urethane. Then we're going to move on to the seat fabrication and all this wiring. How is it that I can make my mini bike street legal? Well, we're going to look at least at the wiring part to make sure that you have all the safety, turn indicators, headlights, high beam, low beam, horn, tail light, brakes, all that stuff hooked up. So if you were to try and make your mini bike street legal, you would at least know how to wire it. Make sure you watch this video all the way through because it has many of the important things that you need to put on a motorcycle to make it street legal. So keep that in mind. Also, at the very end of the video, I'll have an in-depth explanation on what you need to do to make your mini bike street legal. Don't forget to give the video a like, and let's go check it out, starting with the engine. So what I've got here in front of me is a Tecumseh Power Sport, and then what I have right here is a Keen carb. It's like a little cheap carb I got for like 13 bucks on eBay. I got a link in the description for that, but it actually has the intake manifold bolts straight up to it with no modification whatsoever. So I'm also gonna work on the exhaust here. I got some stainless steel tubing for it, and then I have this box of goodies. So we're gonna work on all this to turn my Tecumseh engine into a real Tecumseh engine. On the inside of the engine, I have an ARC billet connecting rod, stock length. For the valve springs, they are Animal valve springs, 20 pound, and we're putting in new rings and a new piston, as well as a 245 hardened cam. With all these performance parts, we'll get this old seized engine up and running. Man, it's super clean on the inside, so I'm super excited about valve cover so far, even though it looks like total crap on the outside with like moss at one point growing on it. I can squish this till till the coil binds. But with the Briggs, I'm not going to be able to squish it till it binds. If I get the correct install height, it'll work just right. We've got the blower housing off, a lot of the extra junk there off. So you can see here, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 head bolts. Most small engines of this size have 4, so that's cool. It has like an extra one right up here. So that's pretty neat. So I'm going to pull the head and we're going to start stripping it down some more. Then looking here at the bore, so I've got this little magnet here. Anything that's steel, it sticks to it. Nothing. It'll stick to this little fire ring on the head gasket, but it won't stick to the cylinder wall. So we have an aluminum cylinder wall. This is for those of you that are like, I want to modify my governor, or I want to bypass my governor without actually taking the side cover off. Okay, so what happens is you can bypass it. It's totally up to you if you want to do that. But this is what can and does happen all the time. Looking here at the cam, I think this thing is plastic. Didn't sound good. That didn't sound good either. Plastic cam. The whole thing is freaking plastic. Alright, so I have a tap and die set here, super cheap one. So I drilled out the governor hole a little bit bigger than a 1/4 inch. Then I used the 5/16 inch bit here and added the threads. So now a 5/16 inch bolt with some Loctite on it will just go right in there and seal up the governor hole. The stock connecting rod doesn't hold up to higher RPMs, so we're going to go ahead and remove the connecting rod and put that billet connecting rod in. The test for any engine builder is, if you can't get it to run awesome, can you polish the piece of turd? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to polish this piece of turd, make it look real nice. I took the wire brush to this and it almost looks like you can polish a turd. I sanded this with 80, 120, 220, and 400 grit. We're gonna just go ahead and polish up the rest of the block. Short block, side cover, intake adapter, and the cylinder head polished. Actually ported the cylinder head here. You can see that I ported the intake on the left, then I ported the exhaust on the right. And man, these valves are really small. I did a light hone with this ball hone in the bore. One way to check and see if your rings are still good is to check the end gap on them, which is basically stick them in the bore, rotate them, right, and get them all aligned. Use the piston to line them up. It's definitely getting new rings. This is the new ring. Notice the gap is much, much smaller, a lot better. I took the ARC connecting rod, installed it on the new piston with the piston wrist pin, and we're putting it inside the block now with a piston ring compressor. So I got the ARC rod in there, billet rod, pistons installed, rings are clocked. Next is the cam lifters, and we'll put the side cover on. Alright, so if you look here closely, you can see that there is a mark on the crank and the camshaft. Torqued down the head bolts to 19.2 foot-pounds. Have the spark plug indexed to where the strap, the ground strap, is pointing that way, so the open end of the spark plug is facing the open end of the chamber. Okay, so we made some good progress. Got the valve cover polished up, nice and shiny. Got the side cover on here. Flywheel nut torqued down to 65 foot-pounds. It should be at 55, but I torqued it to 65. Got this polished up as well, so super shiny. Valve cover breather tube is just a 1/4-inch fuel line, so that'll be exhausted down to the bottom of the mini bike, out of the way. Got the kill switch wire here. Also got the on-off switch wired up here. So I got the Keen carburetor on here. I think it's 22 millimeters. And the intake matches up exactly with the carburetor. Okay, so there wasn't any port matching that I had to do or any sort of drilling. It just bolted right on. So if you're wanting to put one of these on a Tecumseh, it doesn't need any other adapters, and I got a link in the description for this as well. Stainless steel elbows cut on 45s, and I'm going to be using two of them. One kind of follows the pathway of the air in, or actually out of the engine, and then I'm going to put a pipe on it here, and then I'm going to put another 45 here, and then put the pipe there, so it'll kind of wrap around and go out to the side of the mini bike. I have the front shock here that was bent right about here, and we bent it back into shape. It's got the original rear wheel right here with a massive sprocket, as well as the original base frame. If you're going to use any of the parts here in the video, make sure you use this wiring diagram. Many of the parts that I actually used didn't come with any instructions, so this was very helpful, and I spent a lot of time coming up with this wiring diagram. Headlight has a high beam and a low beam on it, if you look at the wiring here. And we've got some new shocks that I got from Go Power Sports, alright? And we got some stickers for that. That'll for sure add some horsepower, right? So I got a link in the description for a lot of these parts. If you guys are like, oh, that's pretty cool, I want to put that on my mini bike or go-kart, you can check those out. These are the hand controls, kill switch, we got horn, we got all kinds of crazy stuff on here. So we're going to be using some of these controls, and we're going to put that on the handlebars here. These are some crazy ape hangers, and we'll figure out where we're going to put the battery, and we're going to figure out, you know, wiring, that type of thing, so we can kind of get our base going with the engine placement, with the exhaust placement, and with the battery placement. This is a horn that I got on the line. It just runs on 12 volts, and then it has a little screw to adjust the intensity of the tone. Yeah, so I'm just gonna bend this bracket a little bit and then weld it in place so it'll fit right up here. So now that we know the horn works, we got the bracket all cut up, and I'm using my 4.5 inch angle grinder with a wire wheel cup, and I removed the metal there, and we're just going to go ahead and weld it all together. Next up is this battery. It's going to be what powers headlight, brake lights, signals, all that good stuff. And you know, I was thinking about putting it right here, something like that. That would be a good spot for it. But with the way this thing is, it likes to wheelie a lot, so I'm trying to get as much weight up front as possible. So thinking I'll put it somewhere maybe just right below there. I'm going to take this angle iron and chop it up into a few pieces. Battery fits in there just right. What you're seeing here is a tubing notcher. I'm taking a hole saw and we make a notch in there, and that will be used for the other side of the battery box holder. The box is going to be welded right here, here, and then we're going to weld this piece of tube up here. These are going to be the running lights. They are a combined total of 20 watts. We'll probably have to fab up a bracket for these, but this might be able to fit as is. I'm going to just extend this bracket out, right? I'm going to weld another piece of metal here on both sides so that it can kind of attach right like that. Now that I have this bracket fabricated, it will be able to hold both the daytime running lights as well as the main high-low beam headlight. Next I have this little relay for the flashers, so that would be when I turn on the hazard lights or the blinkers. This is what creates an intermittent flasher signal. I'm thinking about putting it right here on top of the battery. There's not a lot of space, but there's a perfect little spot for it. Kind of somewhere right around there. This is what we call a regulator rectifier. Okay, so what it does is it takes the AC voltage from the engine right here, okay, and it takes this voltage and it turns it upside down on the AC sine wave, okay? So we're gonna get a constant DC voltage, and it's going to regulate it so it won't overcharge the battery and overheat it. Now that we have the studs welded on here, that creates a small gap so I can have a wire run underneath the regulator. It'll go back to the tail lights and the blinkers. So what happens is this is attached to the brake, the actual part that moves, and when you step on the brake, it makes a connection between these two wires. Okay, so here it is. Next up is the combination tail light slash brake light slash turn signal indicators. We'll cut it off and see just how close we are. Minibike is up on the vise, and I got my TIG welder out. So I got it stitch welded up. Alright, so I've done most of the modifications that I'm comfortable with right now. I'm thinking about possibly doing some LED underglow under the front fender, under the rear fender. There's a master switch that I want to put in either on this side or this side. And as you can see here, this is where I'm going to cram most of the electronics. I'll get the wiring through here, and then all the wiring will be kind of under in this spot right here. So I was thinking about putting a switch somewhere around here or here, and it'll be kind of ugly. So what I was thinking about doing is I'll get some of this diamond plate here, maybe get a piece of cardboard and trace the exact spot that I need to cut out. So this plate will be right here to cover it up. Something like that, not super fancy. Then I'll just reverse it and trace it on the other side. So I'll have a mirror image on each one. This is the flasher relay. I just used some epoxy and I'm letting it set up. I took these little pieces of sheet metal and tack welded 1/4-inch nuts on them. There's 4, and I'm going to be using them to mount this to the frame, okay? While I had my bench grinder out, I went ahead and fabricated the 1/4-inch stainless steel exhaust flange. So I've been working on the exhaust a little bit. What we've got here is the flange, and then I've tack welded a 45-degree stainless steel elbow here. I'm thinking about chopping it somewhere right around here and then putting the muffler on right there. The next step in this build process is to get all the parts primed and painted. I'm actually using an airbrush and airbrush paint, but it's a water-based automotive style airbrush paint, okay? Now, if you look at the rims here, they are now painted. And after paint, we're going to do some automotive clear coat. But this is what the parts look like before a clear coat. Clear coat really makes it pop. It looks kind of flat. It's a pearlescent color, and the color will only pop more once I do a final automotive clear coat on it. And for those of you asking, how do I make my rims look so nice? This is how I do it, with painter's tape.
What's up, guys? We're just doing some clear coat in the backyard with 2K urethane.
Alright, so here we are, next day. Got that wet coat on there. I'm going to do one more wet coat after this, but you know, this is really looking good. So I'm here in the house. I've got some 5-inch high density foam. It's going to be taller than this. It's going to make the seat actually a little bit taller than the original. And I'm actually going to embroider something on there. So this is the top part of the seat, and this is the side part of the seat. And I've got this little thing here. Just penciled it in right there, and we're going to stitch over top of it. How many? Hey! So that's how you do a seat. You use T-nuts, plywood, high density foam, some vinyl, and some welting. And if you want to use a free motion foot for your sewing machine, you can embroider something like that with embroidery thread. Now this is the first time I did embroidery, not the first time I did a seat. It was pretty easy to do, and all in all, when you're done, it costs about $40 to do an entire seat. So it's pretty inexpensive, and it looks a lot nicer than the original seat. These things on the top are straight shank cover buttons. You can also use a cover button and put some vinyl on it yourself. And I polished up the suspension springs for the front suspension. Old is on the left, polished is on the right. Now it's time to start putting everything together. I'm using some synthetic grease for the front suspension, and I'm using some 5/8 inch snap ring bearings, and I'm using a socket to install the bearings. A lot of these older mini bikes and go-karts have universal parts on them, so even though the user's manual might not show the exact part number that you can find, you can get it from Go Power Sports. It helps my channel when you click on the links in the description, and you might actually find something that you've been looking for a long time. So go check that out in the link below. This is the rear tail light. It also actually serves as turn indicator as well as the brake light. These are the LED lights right here for the turn indicators. It comes in a little strip like this, and you basically tighten it up, and it has an adhesive backing, and once you get it tightened up, then you can just clip this little piece off there, and you've got your left and right hand turn indicators. I wanted to have a little bit more visibility with my turn indicator, so I actually used some handlebar turn indicators for both the left and right hand turn signals. So we get the turn signal from the rear and the front as well as the handlebars. It's actually pretty neat. As you can see here, I've got the left hand wired up, and instead of having the wires showing, I'm routing them through the handlebars. So this typically goes in this channel, okay? What I did is I cut this channel, I'm gonna stick it in here, put some rivets in there to hold it in place, and then I'm gonna use this to kind of cap it off, and then I'm gonna seal it all up with silicone. If you look closely, the carburetor is right next to the exhaust, so I'm just wrapping it. And then to wrap things up with the engine, I'm dyno tuning it as well as getting the right air-fuel ratio. Okay, so I am back in the garage now, and this will be the first change of the oil. Whoa! Alright. So there you go. Pretty nasty, but not too bad. I have this stuff, it's called One Shot, right? And I've got black, blue, yellow, red, and white. And I've got these, basically they're pinstriping brushes. I've only used this one, okay? And I add a little bit of mineral spirits to it to thin it out. But I've been kind of messing around. So I've never done this before, okay? But I've kind of been messing around trying to figure out how to pinstripe. So what I did is I made the Thunderbird, right? Here's the Thunderbird. Got a little lightning bolt on there. And those are its wings up there. And then I've kind of been messing around trying to figure out how to do pinstriping. Now it doesn't look like normal pinstriping, or I don't know if there is a normal, but I kind of like it. I'm trying to just playing around with the colors here. Getting some nice little patterns going on the bike, and I kind of don't want to overdo it either. So, you know, this is kind of what it'll look like. I'm going to start adding the dots. So to add these dots, all I got to do is take the end of the brush and just dip it in the paint, and then. So anyway, this is kind of my work in progress with pinstriping. As you can see, I've added a little more detail to everything. Got the little dots I've added, little blue accent there. Got some more of that over here. Okay, so that's kind of the general theme. I'm just using this razor blade to mark up the diamond plate before I do the plasma cutting. That just gives me a little edge that I can see when I'm cutting. Alright, so as you can see, we've got Thunderbird etched in there, and I've tacked right here and here. I'm in the process of bending this little part down. I'm gonna tack it, bend, tack, bend, tack, bend to get a nice little radius here. And then I've got another piece over here that will go on the other side. This is literally the second time I've ever welded aluminum, and it shows. You can see it's pretty clean there, but where I did tacks, there was some oxidation. I'm sure it's from contaminating the tip. It's not like steel. So anyway, if you have any tips for me, let me know on how to TIG weld aluminum. What is your experience? And the final step here is plasma cutting out the Thunderbird that I had etched in the clutch cover, and we're putting it all back together. And let's send it. So that's it. Thanks guys for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. It helps me out a ton. Please keep in mind that I've got a bunch of other videos coming down the line, go-karts, engine builds, that kind of stuff. And if you're thinking about making your own mini bike street legal, my mini bike is not actually street legal. And the reason why is my state specifically says a miniature motorcycle cannot be registered in the state. So if you can't register it, you can't make it street legal. Even if you have everything that a motorcycle needs to become street legal, by definition, in most states, you're probably not going to be able to make your mini bike street legal. Now you can go walk around and say, hey, my mini bike's street legal, but it may not truly be street legal, even if it has all of the safety appliances and brakes on it. Now, if you want to go down this path, I've looked into it, and what you have to do is basically say your mini bike is a motorcycle, and so you have to say you built it yourself, and it doesn't have a VIN number. And in order to get a VIN and a title, you have to have a police officer inspect your miniature motorcycle, okay? And they might take one look at it and say, ha, yeah, that's a mini bike and you can't register it. And then it'll fail the inspection. That's just the way it is. Now, if for some reason you can get your insurance company to give you a bonded title, that's gonna cost money. If you can get a police officer to actually inspect and pass your home-built motorcycle, that's another hurdle you can jump over. And then you'll obviously have to get a motorcycle driver's license, or the class of driver's license you need to have needs to include a motorcycle on it. And if you can do all that stuff, you got to have DOT approved for highway use tires on a mini bike, as well as all the safety stuff. And even then, all of the risk is on you, because you're taking something that should be a motorcycle, making it smaller, and people aren't going to see you as well on the freeway, highway, on the roads. So it's a very, very big risk that you take by driving a mini bike anywhere on any road. And that's totally up to you on what you want to do. I'm not condoning this, I'm just saying it's nearly impossible to make your mini bike truly street legal. So keep that in mind, but let me know in the comments below, has anybody been able to make their mini bike truly street legal and registered in their state? If they have, please let us know how you did it. Thanks guys for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.